Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lesser Known But Awesome Heroes. And today, since F.W. Waller did his first Brotherhood of Evil Mutants video, and I told you guys that I would do this, I'm going to post the very first character in my Children of the Atom edition. Now, what is this edition? This edition is basically where I take lesser known X-Men characters, or characters that haven't been used in the X-books in a while, or at least characters that people kind of overlook. And I think today, anybody who is a Chris Claremont fan of his run of X-Men will recognize this character, and also he is the first Native American to ever be featured in lesser known history. That's right, today I will be talking about the X-Men known as Forge. So let's get started. Okay, Forge for his first appearance and/or debut was Uncanny X-Men issue 184 in August of 1984. He was created by John Romita Jr. and Chris Claremont. His noted team affiliations are the X-Men, X-Factor, X-Corporation, and X-Force. His abilities is that he has superhuman intuitive talent at inventing, genius-level intellect, is a skilled inventor, has various mystical abilities due to his Native American background, and is a skilled marksman. A more elaborate version is that he is a mutant who has the unsurpassed brilliance in technology. Now, let me scroll down here to his power set to give you a much more better description of how his abilities work. Okay, Forge is a mutant, which I have to go on a little aside. Originally, from what I remember, he was a human before they decided to make him a mutant, which that took away his uniqueness, I feel, if that was true. Because he would have been a human ally to the X-Men. Much in the same way that Juggernaut is not a damn mutant. Thank you, Brett Ratner. But I digress. He has a superhuman intuitional ability to invent mechanical devices, and this is backed up by his ability to visually perceive mechanical energy in motion. Basically, he can talk to machines in a way, or figure out the inner workings before he even constructs them or deconstructs them. This power would allow him to recognize the potential and functionality of multiple devices within his range, a skill that is combined with his natural intelligence, which gives him the ability to conceive, design, and build highly advanced mechanical devices and operate, modify, or disassemble existing technology, and even create countermeasures to them. His superhuman talent for invention does not mean that he is of a superhuman intellect. Even a genius at invention must, for the most part, consciously work out the theoretical principles behind his or her invention, and then the design of the invention itself through a series of logical steps. In Forge's case, however, most of these logical steps are worked out by his subconscious, and hence Forge himself may not be entirely aware of what exactly he is creating and or making. And so he oftentimes would disassemble an invention after creating it to see how it would work. He also wears synthetic stretch fabric backed by micro-thin bulletproof Kevlar and thermal insulation when he was an active member of the X-Men, especially during Claremont's run. He would sometimes employ devices of his own invention. The most notable among these was his neutralizer gun, which could suppress superhuman mutant abilities. The only known examples of this device had been destroyed, as he had upgraded the gun many times. He has also invented a handheld scanning device that can detect the presence of superhuman beings or aliens. He also has a knowledge in many scientific and technological fields. He also possesses various mystical abilities, such as spellcasting through mystical training. Though he rarely uses this, he expresses an extensive knowledge of Native American magic. And this is due to the fact that he was trained in Native American shamanic arts. So he also has mystic powers on top of his mutant ability, though he prefers to rely on his technologically based abilities. His bionic right hand and right leg often conceal weapons and devices that he can use in combat. In addition, they can also be outfitted with computer interfaces and plasma blasters as backups. His skill as a hand-to-hand combatant and a marksman from his military training were so impressive that even Nick Fury offered him a position in S.H.I.E.L.D., to which Forge humbly declined. So, let's get into the actual backstory of Forge. Okay, Forge is I talked about the early years where he had the superhuman ability for invention and the intuitive genius. And it's as natural to him as it is breathing. He is also, as I said, he was Native American, and he is a member of the Shawnee Nation. So he's part of the Shawnee Indian tribe. Although he was trained as a medicine man, he has predominantly relied on technology rather than the mystical powers, well, not mystical powers, but mysticism that he was trained in to accomplish his goals. This rift between him and his elder teacher, Naz, made Forge leave his past behind him and join the military. And while in the army, he became a good soldier and even served in the Vietnam War. After rising through the ranks to become a sergeant, he was asked by S.H.I.E.L.D. to join. He would decline, however, because he saw his need was in Vietnam. During his second tour of duty in the war, his comrades were ambushed and killed by enemy soldiers. In anger and retaliation, he used their spirits to summon a band of demons to destroy them. Forge, however, concerned about his former comrades' spirits being stuck in limbo and whatnot, ordered a B-52 bombing on his position to close the portal from the land of the unliving. The bombs came down, destroying the spirits. However, this action would not be without a heavy price, as Forge lost his right leg and right hand in the process. However, this action also had an even dire consequence, as the demonic Native American Native American demonic entity, known as the Adversary, would come to Earth, and Forge, after he had been defeated and finally sent back to his demonic dimension, would be hesitant to ever implore his mystical abilities, due to the fact that he thought the Adversary would one day come back. Years later, he would create cybernetic replacements for his lost limbs. When Tony Stark stopped making advanced weaponry for the federal government, Forge was hired as an employee of the DoD. One of his earliest commissions was to design a weapon that could detect shape-shifting aliens. Shape-shifting aliens, or the shape-shifting alien race known as the Dire Wraiths. Subsequently, however, Forge would construct a device capable of neutralizing mutant powers. Following orders from the President, Henry Peter Gyrich, an agent of the National Security Council, took the device. Forge, who protested and even was outraged that his device was untested, and two, it was extremely dangerous to use, as he just wanted to tweak it to neutralize mutant powers, not completely take them away. The device would be used against a member of the X-Men, which was Rogue. However, against Rogue, who had allegedly killed a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent due to her power siphoning abilities. However, the device would instead accidentally misfire and hit Storm, who would then lose her abilities and would actually fall to a river, to which Forge ran out and actually rescued her from the river. He would then bring her back to his home in Dallas, Texas, and during her stay she began to have a romantic connection with him. However, when it was revealed that it was in fact Forge's fault that Storm had lost her powers, she held him in contempt and left him. And she would rejoin the X-Men at this point. However, Storm would later return to Forge and help him fight the Dire Wraiths. And the Dire Wraiths would resurface to prevent Forge from perfecting his neutralizer, and they were defeated by the combined forces of the X-Men, Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus' sister, Magik, and the second Magik, who was Amanda Sefton. Forge would later improve his neutralizer, however, against the Wraiths, yet he became hesitant to design more devices like it because of what had happened with Storm. So with each prototype that he upgraded, he would destroy the previous model and any designs related to it. And also, And with the help of the Wraith's enemy, Rom the Space Knight, Forge would be able to create a large-scale version of the neutralizer that would hang in Earth's orbit. Rom and Forge would actually use this device on the Dire Wraith homeworld, and this would cast the entire race into the other dimensional limbo. After saving the world, Forge destroyed all remaining neutralizers and focused on ridding the world of the adversary once and for all. The adversary would have other plans, however, through and in the shape of Naz convincing Storm that Forge had gone insane with grief after she left and was planning to open a gate to hell. She had tried to kill Forge, but the moment she stabbed him, she saw that he was sane and that she had been tricked. The adversary banished Storm and Forge to another dimension, devoid of human life. They spent an unknown amount of time there, rekindling their romance. Finally, they discovered a way home to stop the adversary. Forge would restore Storm's powers and used her abilities to power a gate back home. Forge and Storm would then arrive back on Earth and join the X-Men in their battle against the adversary. In the X-Men's final fight with the adversary, Forge was required to sacrifice 9 willing souls to banish the adversary forever. 8 X-Men and Madeline Pryor volunteered and died in the casting of Forge's spell. However, the goddess Roma intervened and secretly restored the X-Men to life. Magique, young sister of the X-Men Colossus, viewed Forge as responsible for the death of her older brother and battled against Forge, who fought back using his knowledge of Native American sorcery. Feeling guilty over his involvement, Forge allowed Magique to stab him with her soul sword in hopes that it would kill him. Instead, its effects caused both mutants to come to terms with their shortcomings. Forge, unaware of the X-Men's resurrection, found himself fighting alongside Mystique's Freedom Force and an interim team of X-Men against the Reavers at Moore Island. He was essential in winning that battle, having used his mutant skills to create a rifle that deactivated the cyborg enemy's Skullbuster and forced the rest of the Reavers to retreat. During the battle, Destiny was killed, but not before foreseeing that Forge and Mystique would one day love each other, a fact that both parties found implausible. Afterwards, Mystique blamed him for Destiny's death. Banshee would approach Forge, hunting for leads about the whereabouts of the X-Men. Forge was convinced by visions that all of the X-Men were still alive. By this time, however, his days as a soldier in the Vietnam War were depicted. The two of them traveled all over the world looking for their missing friends. Forge and Banshee would eventually find the X-Men and become full-time members. They fought against several threats such as the Genosian soldiers, the Skrulls, and the Shadow King. The fight against the Skrulls was Forge's first trip into outer space. His skills were critical in defeating Cameron Hodge and overthrow the Genosian government. His plans were kept deep inside his own mind by a self-induced trance that even the forced removal of his false limbs did not break. He later would become a member of the X-Mansion's support team. He was responsible for redesigning the Danger Room and the Blackbird jet. With the arrival of Bishop and Storm's constant involvement with the team, Forge and Storm's relationship became rocky. It became too that eventually he would leave the X-Men when he believed that Storm would have rejected his proposal of marriage. Ironically, she would have said yes. The couple continued to have an on-again, off-again relationship until it ended for good, and Forge went back home to Dallas to become a government contractor again to help with the mental care of Mystique, who had become schizophrenic. During her stay, Forge and Mystique would grow closer and would eventually have an affair. Forge would then go on to replace Valerie Cooper, I believe is how you pronounce that, as the new government liaison for the mutant superhero team X-Factor. Forge would undergo his second cosmic adventure while with X-Force, venturing into the far side of the sun with dozens of other heroes in an incident that would be known as the Infinity Crusade. Forge was personally affected as one of his team, Wolfsbane, had been kidnapped by the villain called the Goddess. The adventure was very anticlimactic for Forge as he ended up orbiting a duplicate Earth in escape pod alongside a vigilante nomad vigilant nomad. He did not wish to fight, but his pod was needed as part of a communications chain. When the team began to experience personal problems, Forge took a more active involvement, gradually taking over the leadership from the remaining members of X Factor. In this context, he saw the mutant criminals Mystique and Sabretooth forced to become unwilling members of his team. Forge also came to terms with his heritage when the adversary had returned. With Naz's assistance, Forge was able to defeat the adversary by combining technology created using his mutant powers with his mystical abilities. Under Forge's leadership, X Factor was tricked into hunting and battling former team member James Madrox, the Multiple Man. Following this incident, Forge severed the team's involvement with the government and would lead them underground. Forge and Mystique would become more attached to one another while working together as members of the team, and Forge would ultimately fall in love with her. And during their time underground, another former X Factor member, Strong Guy, would awake from a coma that he had suffered due to his powers overstressing his heart, and Forge would create a device which would save his life. Along with other team members, Forge would be severely injured after Sabretooth betrayed and attacked the entire team. Mystique's feelings for Forge did not prevent her from escaping her forced membership while Forge was recuperating. After recovering from his injuries, he refused to become a member of the new X Factor's lineup led by former team leader Havoc, as he felt that Havoc was no longer trustworthy. This new version of X Factor was disbanded shortly thereafter, but for a time Forge was not active in any mutant groups, though he briefly worked as support staff at the X-Mansion. Forge would later become part of Xavier's underground movement. He worked with former X Factor member Multiple Man in Genosha. Afterwards, he would return to the X-Men and become a mentor to Danielle Moonstar for a brief stint. Later, Professor X would ask him for help in locating Mystique, whom he needed for a clandestine mission. Forge would also help Cannonball and Siren find Cable with the aid of everybody's favorite Merc with the Mouth, Deadpool. Also, he would build a special pair of gauntlets for the new X-Men member Surge to help control her electrostatic abilities. Afterwards, he would return to his lab to build a Nimrod unit with the primary objective of protecting mutants and the secondary objective of protecting humans. He would then encounter a time-traveling Nimrod suffering from severe damage, demanding that Forge fix him. This version of Nimrod came from an alternate future and had compelled an alternate version of Forge, married to Storm with 2 kids, to build a device to allow it to travel back into the past. And this alternate Forge had seemingly complied, but actually built a device to send Nimrod not only back in time, but also to another timeline, and to disable him upon arrival. Nimrod threatened to harm this reality Storm, and Forge offered to transfer Nimrod into his own version of the Sentinel, which Nimrod agreed to, and the transfer was interrupted by the arrival of Surge and the rest of the new X-Men, who had received Forge's distress call through Surge's own gauntlets. In the ensuing battle, Forge would help them defeat this alternate Nimrod. And also during the Messiah complex, after James Madrox and Layla James Madrox and Layla Miller were sent into the future, Forge would go on a mission at Cyclops behest to rendezvous with other X-Men who were in their way trying to confront Mr. Sinister's forces. He would be shot by a seemingly treacherous Bishop. He is then seen in the recovery room alongside other X-Men. And during the Divided We Stand, Forge had not been the same since Bishop attacked him during his mad quest to murder the first mutant child following M-Day. Forge would suffer an array of injuries, including serious head trauma, and Bishop would steal several time travel devices that Forge had reversed engineered. Throughout his recovery, he had become obsessed with recreating his notes and research on these devices. Fixated at an unhealthy degree on this project, Forge shuts himself off in his home at Eagle Plaza to devote all his time to his work. But before he begins, he enhances his home defense systems to ensure that he never falls victim to such an attack again. And later, he would return in Astonishing X-Men issue 29, when the X-Men fly to his complex on Windagore Mountain to confront him about his apparent role in the interdimensional invasion of Earth. After following a trail of mysterious, genetically created mutants and death, the X-Men finally track Forge down, who, through a monologue, reveals his true madness. He endeavors to save the world from the annexation and invasion from a parallel world on the other side of the Ghost Box, the transdimensional teleporter. He plans this by sending the X-Men to the parallel universe that is home to the Ghost Boxes to destroy them before the invasion even begins. The X-Men try to talk Forge down, but he rebukes them and furthers his madness by forcibly opening the Ghost Box, risking all life on Earth. Thanks to the assistance of Abigail Brand and Beast, a world-destroying laser is shot into the opening of the Ghost Box before anything is destroyed. Aurora offers Forge a chance to come back with him. He only screams of his rejection by Aurora, and she lets him go. He remains in his complex as it is destroyed. And as part of Marvel Now, Forge will actually be shown to be alive following the destruction of his complex, and will be approached by Cable after using his telepathic abilities to help cure him of his insanity, and he will become part of the new X-Force team that would be created by Cable. Forge would then create a cybernetic arm for Cable and become the first member of Cable's X-Force team. And really, guys, that's it. That's all that I can really say about Forge's backstory. It's cool that they're bringing him back in Marvel Now, but I feel personally, guys, that Forge is a very underrated X-Men character. I mean, if you've listened to everything that I just said in this video, Forge is a very underrated character, and especially during Claremont's run, Claremont made him not just the mechanic or support staff member, but Claremont actually had Forge play, a pivotal role in the X-Men. He actually would be a field agent. And I really hope that with this Marvel Now X-Force book that they actually do that. But anyway, guys, this has been the first video in the Children of the Atom edition. Stay tuned for the next ones. I think you'll like them. And as always, stay tuned.